Many people have heard of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder and are at least somewhat familiar with what that might look like when somebody comes home from war or, goes through a really horrific event like, that's potentially life-threatening. What I think many people are not aware of is a separate category of PTSD, which is called complex PTSD. And I want to explore that a little bit in today's video. This is something that I feel really strongly about. I've done a lot of work with people with this diagnosis, and it's tough to see the pain that they're in when they present for treatment. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about symptoms and what that might look like. But more importantly, I'm going to speak to the experience of sitting with somebody who is going through this and what it really might present as in the room or when you're in front of somebody. What is the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder? I think this is such a great question and something that there's a lot of confusion and even just not awareness around. And so the main difference between the two is that often PTSD is one distinct event or, maybe a series of events over a small time. So, you're serving in Iraq and you're in this war zone and you see some really horrible things and you come back and then you're diagnosed with PTSD. And that has a certain look and a flavor to it. With complex PTSD, this is a person who over years has experienced several traumatic incidences where they feared for their own safety or the safety of someone they loved. And so, as opposed to one discrete event, this is a series of events over, years that gradually accumulate to the point where the individual will present with symptoms of PTSD. And these symptoms are often more severe in some ways, and we're going to talk a little bit about that next. One of the most difficult things about complex PTSD is that the trauma that people go through is typically of an interpersonal nature. And so this is things like, abuse from a parent or sexual abuse. And so, but this occurs over and over and over again to the point where the individual really loses a sense of safety and trust in others. And so much so that we're now understanding that there's a huge connection between adult physical health issues and some of the mental health problems that come from being raised in an unsafe environment. And unsafe doesn't have to be physically unsafe. It can be psychologically unsafe. It can be emotionally unsafe. And so we're going to talk a little bit in the next segment about something called the A.C.E.S, which is the Adverse Childhood Events Questionnaire. In the last segment, I mentioned the A.C.E.S, which is the Adverse Childhood Event Survey. I think I said questionnaire, but it's actually a survey. And this consists of 10 questions. And the nature of the questions are around early childhood experiences of lacking safety in the home. And this can be things like, one of the questions is, did a parent ever physically harm you? And it goes into specifics of what that would look like. It's a sensitive questionnaire, and so I don't want to trigger somebody unnecessarily. But the questions are around things in the home environment, around alcohol use, individuals going to prison, physical safety, having your physical needs met. And it's 10 questions, and however many questions you answer yes to, that's your A.C.E.S score. So why is this important, and why are we talking about this? One of the most interesting things to come out of this survey was the connection between these early childhood experiences and later serious physical health problems in life. Things like diabetes, fibromyalgia, mental health issues, anxiety, depression. And so there is definitely a clear correlation between how safe you were as a child and what your outcomes are as an adult. And we're going to wrap this around back to complex PTSD in the next segment. But I just wanted to mention that people experience trauma in different ways. And there can be individuals with a very high A.C.E.S score who don't end up having PTSD or complex PTSD. Their pain and suffering manifests in the form of physical issues later in life. So trauma pops up in all kinds of ways. And we can't always predict what that's going to look like in any given person. One of the recent findings about complex PTSD, and this is just a little aside, but complex PTSD is not a separate category in the DSM-5, but it is in the International Classification of Diseases, which is basically what healthcare providers across the world use to diagnose certain conditions. And one of the things that has come to our attention is that complex PTSD is often misdiagnosed initially as borderline personality disorder. And that's because some of the behaviors that individuals with complex PTSD present with are similar, not the same, but similar enough to borderline personality disorder that it results in this confusion. I hope you found this video helpful and interesting. If you did, please like it below and feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we're going to be producing more and more videos on a variety of different mental health topics. And please reach out if there's something specific you would like us to cover or address in an upcoming video.